She was sitting near the window of the school library, quietly reading a textbook that most students never touched until exam season. To everyone around her, she looked like a normal student, calm, silent, and focused. She wore simple clothes, kept her hair tied back, and rarely spoke unless someone asked her a direct question. Many of her classmates assumed she was shy or maybe even boring, because she never tried to stand out. But the truth was that she preferred quiet places. She chose silence over attention, and she liked to avoid unnecessary conversations. Still, no one knew there was a reason behind that silence, something she had kept hidden from people for years. Her teachers liked her because she was respectful and hardworking, but even they never imagined that anything extraordinary was hidden behind her gentle behavior. She came to school on time, submitted her assignments early, and sat in the same seat every day. Some students even teased her for being too serious, but she never reacted. She would simply smile softly and return to her work. What no one understood was that she had already seen more pressure in her life than most students her age. She didn't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. One afternoon, while the school grounds were unusually calm, she was walking across the courtyard with her backpack slung over one shoulder. A group of students were playing near the staircase and almost bumped into her, but she stepped aside quietly so they wouldn't fall. She apologized even though it wasn't her fault. That was her nature, soft, polite, and gentle. People saw her kindness, but never saw beyond it. They never asked where she came from, or why she could stay so calm even during stressful days. If they had paid closer attention, they might have noticed her posture, the way she observed her surroundings, and the unusual sharpness in her eyes. When something unexpected happened, she had lived her entire life trying to blend in. Her family had moved many times, and she had changed schools repeatedly. This school was her attempt to finally live like an ordinary teenager. She told herself she would just stay quiet, study hard, and avoid anything that could put her in the spotlight. But fate didn't work that way for her. She didn't know that everything she had been trying to hide was about to come out in the most unexpected moment, during a crisis that none of her classmates could ever imagine. Later that day, during a regular class, a sudden emergency drill started in the school. Usually drills didn't bother anyone. Students walked outside, the teachers guided them, and life continued. But this time something felt different. The sound was sharper, the instructions were faster, and the school staff seemed more serious than usual. She sensed it immediately. She looked around and noticed something the others didn't. The air felt heavier. The communication devices the staff carried were unusually active. Her heart beat a little faster, not in fear, but in recognition, while the rest of the students laughed and joked as they walked toward the ground. She quietly scanned the sky. Her eyes moved from one corner to another, searching for something only she understood. She thought she heard a distant sound, a pattern she hadn't forgotten. She turned slightly, listening carefully. Most people would have ignored it, but she couldn't. Her training, even though it was supposed to be behind her, wouldn't let her ignore certain sounds. A teacher noticed her stopping and asked if everything was okay. She simply nodded and joined the group again. The other students were busy taking pictures, complaining about the sun, or chatting about weekend plans. No one noticed the slightest worry on her face. She pressed her lips together, thinking something wasn't right. She could feel it. Then, just as the students reached the open field, the sound grew clearer. It wasn't loud enough for the others to react, but she recognized it instantly, the rhythmic thump of powerful helicopter blades. Not just any helicopter. Her breath caught for a moment. She knew that sound by heart. She had heard it many times in the past. She slowly lifted her eyes toward the sky, and there it was, a Black Hawk helicopter flying low, cutting through the air like an urgent message. Students looked up, confused, some even excited. "Wow, a helicopter!" one shouted. Another pulled out a phone to record, but she didn't move. Her face went still. She stared at it, not with curiosity, but with a calm, almost trained seriousness. The helicopter circled once, then slowed. Down as if searching for someone on the ground. She felt something inside her shift. A memory, a responsibility, a truth she had locked away. She whispered quietly, but no one heard. Why now? Suddenly, through the loudspeaker of the Black Hawk, a firm voice echoed across the ground. The voice didn't call for the school administration. It didn't call for security. Instead, it called a single name. Her name. The students froze. Teachers looked at each other in confusion. Even the birds seemed to pause mid-flight. But she already knew. Her hidden identity, the one she had spent years protecting, was no longer hidden. For a moment, the entire school field fell silent. Students looked around, wondering if they had heard correctly. Teachers exchanged nervous glances. The voice from the Black Hawk repeated her name again, this time louder, more urgent. No one understood why a military helicopter would know the name of a quiet student who barely spoke above a whisper in class, but she stood completely still. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack. She wasn't afraid, she simply knew this day might come, though she had hoped it never would. Her classmates stared at her with disbelief. Some whispered to each other, some stepped back, and some looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. The girl who always carried extra notebooks, who helped teachers stack chairs after class, who minded her own business, suddenly she was the center of everyone's attention. A teacher gently approached her. "Do you know what this is about?" The teacher asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She didn't answer immediately. She swallowed hard, trying to calm the rush inside her. "I think I do," she finally said, though her voice was barely audible. Before anyone could question her further, the helicopter hovered lower. Dust blew across the field, and students shielded their faces. The Black Hawk's side door opened, and a crew member leaned out, scanning the crowd until his eyes landed on her. His body immediately straightened as if he had found exactly who he was looking for. "Stand back," a staff member shouted, trying to move the crowd away. Students quickly stepped aside, creating a clear path without even realizing it. The helicopter's engine roared above them, but the world around her felt strangely quiet. She slowly walked forward, each step feeling heavier than the last. She stopped a few meters from the helicopter. The crew member raised a hand, signaling her to wait. He pressed something on his headset and then shouted, "We need her immediately. It's urgent." Teachers were confused, startled, even frightened, but she knew this wasn't about danger to the school. If it were, they wouldn't call her name specifically. Something else had happened, something connected to her past, something she had wanted to escape. A senior staff member stepped forward. "Why are you calling her? What is going on?" The crew member didn't answer right away. He spoke into his headset again, listening carefully. Then he turned to the staff member and said, "We can't explain everything here, but she is needed, now." Students gasped. Some even took a step closer, unable to hide their curiosity. But her eyes remained focused on the helicopter. She knew this world. She knew the urgency in the crew member's voice. She recognized the coded language he used while speaking to the pilot. She could tell by the flight pattern that the helicopter wasn't here for show. It was responding to a real emergency. One of her classmates whispered, "But she's just a student." That was exactly the life she had tried to create, a quiet, ordinary existence. And now it was slipping away. The helicopter hovered lower again, and the crew member leaned out once more. "We have permission to extract her," he shouted. Those words confirmed it. This was not a mistake. They weren't looking for someone else. They were looking for her. She stepped forward, her heartbeat steady but strong. Memories flashed in her mind-long training nights, the weight of responsibility, the code of silence she had promised to follow. She had walked away from all of that. She wanted to be normal. She wanted to be anonymous. She wanted to be invisible, but her past had caught up faster than she expected. Just as she reached the helicopter's side, the pilot's voice echoed through the loudspeaker again. This time it wasn't a command, it was a plea. We need you. It's critical. Something in his tone made her pause. It wasn't fear. It wasn't panic. It was respect, a deep respect that only came from people who had seen her capabilities. Before, only a few people in her previous life had ever spoken to her like that. She took a slow breath, her mind racing through possibilities. Why now? What emergency could be serious enough for them to come all the way here? The pilot leaned out, lifted his visor slightly, and made eye contact with her. His expression was stern but relieved. "We've been trying to reach you for hours," he said. "You're the only one who can respond." Her classmates stared in shock. She didn't look different to them. She still wore her school uniform. She still had her simple backpack. But their eyes were finally seeing what she had worked so hard to hide. She was not an ordinary student. "Tell me what happened," she said calmly. Her voice suddenly steady, stronger than anyone at the school had ever heard. The crew member quickly handed her a headset. As soon as she put it on, the sound of the helicopter faded, replaced by the serious, clipped voices of the team inside. She listened carefully. Her expression changed slightly, still controlled, but sharper, more focused. She removed the headset slowly. "I understand," she said. The pilot nodded once, firmly. "Are you ready?" She stared at the school field, at the shocked faces of students and teachers who had no idea who she really was. She had wanted to leave that life behind, but she couldn't ignore what was happening. Lives depended on her. Finally she whispered, "I'll go." And in that moment, everyone realized the truth. She had never been ordinary. The rotor blades grew louder as she stepped closer to the Black Hawk. Wind rushed past her face, but she walked steadily, as if her feet remembered this world, even though she had tried to forget it. A crew member reached down and helped her aboard. The moment she crossed the doorway, something in her shifted. Her posture changed. Her shoulders straightened, her eyes sharpened. It was subtle, but the crew noticed it immediately. They exchanged quick glances, silently acknowledging that the person they had trained with was back. Inside the helicopter, everything felt familiar: the sound of the engines, the organized chaos of flight gear, the clipped communication between the pilot and the base. For a second, she closed her eyes, letting herself breathe in the environment she once lived in. She had tried so hard to step away from it, but now that she was here, she could feel the old part of herself waking up. The pilot turned slightly in his seat. "We don't have much time," he said. There was no panic in his voice, but there was urgency, real urgency. "What happened?" she asked. The crew chief handed her a small tablet with a live map and mission details. She scanned the screen quickly. A rescue team had gone down during a search operation in a remote mountain region. Weather conditions had worsened unexpectedly. Communications were unstable. The terrain was steep and visibility had dropped so low that regular pilots couldn't risk going in, but she could. She had done it before. She exhaled quietly. "You should have more pilots available. Why call me?" The pilot looked at her through the reflection on the glass. "Because the only route inside that canyon is the one you discovered, and you're the only one who ever managed to fly it safely." She looked down at the map again. The path he was talking about was narrow, curved, unpredictable, almost impossible for most pilots. But for her, it wasn't about skill alone. It was memory. Muscle memory, experience. She had traveled that route under similar conditions once. It had taken every ounce of focus she had. But she had succeeded. She handed the tablet back. "Is the team still alive?" "We think so," the crew chief said. "But their beacon is weakening." She looked out the window. The school was already shrinking into the distance. She wondered how the students were reacting, how her teachers were coping with the shock. She wondered what stories would spread by the end of the day. For once, she wasn't worried about any of that. Her mind was fully locked on the mission. It felt strange and natural at the same time, like stepping back into an old life that still remembered her. The helicopter suddenly tilted as they changed direction toward the mountains. The wind outside grew harsher, and clouds thickened ahead. The pilot glanced back at her. "We're heading straight into a storm." "I know," she said calmly, "but we don't have another choice." He nodded once. That was all he needed to hear. He trusted her. The entire crew did. They had flown with her before, trained beside her, watched her perform actions that even senior pilots said were impossible. They had always known she was special. The world didn't know it yet, but it was about to dot as they approached the storm. The interior lights flickered slightly. Rain slapped against the windshield like tiny stones. Turbulence shook the cabin, and the crew instinctively held onto the railings. But she sat still, strapped in. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the clouds. "Altitude drop in 3 seconds," the pilot warned. "I see it," she replied, noticing the sudden dark patch forming ahead. She braced herself right before the helicopter dipped sharply. The crew gripped their seats, but she did not flinch. She had flown through worse conditions. This was just the beginning. When they finally broke through the first wall of clouds, the mountains appeared tall, jagged, and shattered by the storm. The rescue zone was somewhere deep inside those ridges. The beacon signal flashed on the monitor. "Faint but still active. They won't last long," the crew chief said quietly. She studied the terrain carefully. The slopes were steep, and the winds were unpredictable. A wrong move could send the helicopter into the rocks. She remembered her old instructor telling her, "This route is for pilots who trust their instincts more than their sight." And she had always been that kind of pilot. The pilot looked back at her again. "You'll have to guide us in. The visibility is dropping too fast. I can't rely on the instruments alone." "Don't worry," she said softly. "I know the way." There was no pride in her voice. No fear either. Just certainty. She took a headset, placed it over her ears, and switched to internal communication mode. "Follow my directions exactly," she said. No hesitation. The pilot straightened, adjusting his grip on the controls. "Understood." The crew braced themselves. The helicopter started descending toward the canyon, the storm rumbling above them. She watched every rock formation, every shadow, every small opening in the clouds. Even after all this time, her mind remembered the path like a map drawn inside her. "Bank left," she said. The helicopter tilted. "Drop altitude by 20, they descended. Hold steady. Wind shift coming from your right." The pilot corrected. Immediately, once again, she wasn't the quiet student from the school hallway. She wasn't the girl who hid behind silence. She was the person the Black Hawks trusted with their lives, and the deeper they flew into the canyon, the more the world outside began to reveal exactly why her name mattered. Asterisk, the deeper the Black Hawk moved into the canyon, the darker the world around them became. Thick clouds rolled low across the mountain walls, breaking apart only long enough to reveal sharp rocks, narrow ledges, and drops so steep the ground seemed to disappear. Visibility shrank to only a few meters. Even the crew, trained for dangerous environments, tightened their grips and held their breath. But she remained calm, her eyes moving with precision from one shadow to another. Her voice guided the pilot steadily. "A little higher, now lean right, slow down just a touch." Each instruction came at exactly the right time, almost before the danger revealed itself. The pilot obeyed without hesitation, trusting her intuition more than the helicopter's. "Instruments," the crew chief whispered to another crew member. "How does she see these openings?" "I can barely see the nose of the aircraft," but she heard him. "You don't look for the openings," she said quietly. "You look for the patterns around them." The crew member blinked in surprise. Her tone wasn't proud, it was experienced. Measured, natural. She was simply explaining the way she had always flown. Suddenly, the helicopter shook violently as a gust of wind slammed into it from the left. The crew instinctively grabbed whatever they could. The pilot gritted his teeth, trying to keep the aircraft steady. "Hold steady," she shouted, leaning forward. "Don't fight the wind ride with it." The pilot nodded quickly, adjusting. The controls. The helicopter tilted, swayed, then finally stabilized. The crew let out a breath they didn't realize they were holding. Soft alarm beeped from the tablet in the crew chief's hand. "The beacon's fading," he said. "Signal's weaker now than it was 20 minutes ago." She reached for the tablet. The small blinking dot blinked slower and slower, the color shifting from strong yellow to dim orange. Her jaw tightened. Whoever they were trying to save, they didn't have much time left. "How far?" she asked. "About 8 kilometers," the crew chief replied. "But the worst part of the canyon is ahead of us." Her eyes shifted toward the front window. The canyon narrowed sharply, leaving barely enough space for the helicopter's blades. Strong winds churned unpredictably between the rock walls, pushing air up, down, sideways like a trap waiting to snap shut. The pilot looked back at her. "It's too narrow. We can't fly through that." "We can," she said, "but you'll have to trust me." "I do," he replied immediately. She leaned closer to the window, studying the dark space ahead. Memories echoed in her mind. The last time she flew this path. The last time she faced winds strong enough to overturn a helicopter. She had been younger then, and more reckless, but even now her instincts told her the way through. "We'll go slow," she said. "Match the rhythm of the wind, not the machine." "Understood," the pilot said. The crew exchanged glances. They knew the risks. They also knew they didn't have a choice. The people waiting in that canyon were counting on them. The helicopter inched forward, the blades dangerously close to the rock walls. Every few meters, the wind tried to push them off course. But her instructions cut through the chaos like a guiding light. Left a little, now rise, hold. Now drop 2 meters. Slow. Her voice remained steady, confident, almost comforting. The pilot followed each instruction, his movements precise. Then finally, the canyon widened. Slightly, opening into a hidden valley. The clouds thinned enough to let pale daylight through. And there far below was a flash of orange, a torn tent, scattered gear, and a small device blinking weakly on the ground. "That's them!" The crew chief shouted. But as the helicopter lowered, they noticed something else: large boulders around the site, unstable and leaning. One wrong vibration could trigger a landslide. The pilot hesitated. "If we go too low, we might shake the rocks loose," he warned. She studied the area carefully. The slopes above the site were steep and fragile. The winds here were softer, but still unpredictable. Landing was impossible. A rope rescue could work, but only if they hovered perfectly still. "We'll hold position," she said. "Lowering a crew member is too risky. The rocks could fall." The pilot frowned. "Then how do we get them out?" She took a deep breath. Her eyes narrowed. "We don't lower anyone," she said. "We land." "But not here, not on the ground." The crew looked confused. "Land where?" the crew chief asked. She pointed to a flat stone ledge higher up, barely wide enough for the helicopter's skids. "There. It's the only stable surface." The pilot stared at the ledge in disbelief. "That's tiny. We'll need a perfect approach." "I'll guide you," she said, just like before. The pilot nodded, adrenaline rising. The helicopter rose again, circling higher toward the ledge. The wind picked up, swirling around the canyon walls. She tightened her grip on the rail. "This is it," she whispered. The helicopter moved toward the narrow ledge, and the crew braced themselves. The storm rumbled above, and the mountain wind howled around them, but she stayed calm, her voice guiding them with complete certainty. Further down the valley, the injured rescue team waited, weak, cold, and unaware that help was only moments away, and she knew this was only the beginning of what she had to do. The helicopter approached the narrow stone ledge slowly, almost cautiously, as if the mountain itself was testing their courage. The ledge looked far too small from the air, just a thin, uneven strip of rock barely wide enough to place both skids. The pilot's breathing grew heavier, but his hands remained steady on the controls. He had flown through storms, over oceans, and across deserts, but this landing would require a level of precision that pilots rarely faced. She leaned forward, carefully watching the angles, the distance, and the shifting winds that scraped against the canyon walls. Her instincts were sharp, almost hyper-aware. Every second mattered, and every correction had to be perfect. "Reduce speed," she instructed softly. The helicopter slowed. "Shift slightly left. Keep your nose up." The pilot followed. "Hold. Your altitude, now descend by 1 meter." The aircraft lowered slowly, but just as the skids neared the ledge, a sudden gust of wind slammed from below, pushing the helicopter upward. The crew gasped. The pilot gripped the controls tighter. For a second, even the mountain seemed to exhale, but she didn't panic. "Ride it, don't fight it. Wait for the wind to settle." The pilot exhaled through his teeth, carefully stabilizing the aircraft. The wind softened again, swirling gently like a warning more than a threat. "Now," she said. "Lower it." Again, slow and steady. The skids touched the stone ledge, just barely. The left skid held. The right skid hovered a few centimeters above the edge, refusing to settle. The helicopter swayed slightly, but she leaned closer, assessing the surface. "It's uneven on the right side," she said. "Tilt 1 degree left. 1 degree?" The pilot repeated nervously. 1 degree, she confirmed. "No more." The pilot moved the controls with absolute precision. The helicopter tilted slightly, just enough to balance the weight. The right skid sank into place. The crew chief's eyes widened. "We're stable, for now," she said. "But we won't be for long." The helicopter remained perched on the ledge like a bird balancing on a branch. The engines kept humming, the rotors cutting through the air steadily. The crew secured their harnesses and prepared gear. Below them, the injured rescue team lay somewhere among the rocks, waiting. "We can't keep the engines low," the pilot said. "This ledge can't handle too much vibration." "I know." She looked at the valley. "We need to move fast." The crew chief grabbed the rope kit, but she stopped him. "No rope," she said. "If the rocks shift, the vibration will cause a collapse. One wrong move and we trigger a slide." "But how do we bring them up?" he asked. She looked at the valley floor, studying the terrain, her mind working quickly. The injured team wasn't far, just down a steep slope. There were broken rocks, a torn tent, and a narrow path that wrapped around the edge of the canyon. "I'll go," she said simply. The pilot turned sharply. "You can't climb down that slope. It's too dangerous." She shook her head calmly. "It's the only way. If we wait for a safer approach, we lose the signal completely." The crew chief stepped forward. "At least let someone go with you." "No," she said firmly. "Too many footsteps will shake the rocks. I'll go alone. I'm the lightest here. Besides, I've done this before." The crew exchanged worried looks, but they knew arguing wouldn't help. When she made a decision with that tone, quiet, clear, unshaken, she was almost always right. The pilot lowered the engine power just enough to keep the helicopter stable, but not too much to risk a slide. She clipped a thin safety line to her harness, stepped out onto the ledge, and felt the cold mountain wind hit her face. The height was dizzying. Below her, the rocky valley stretched like a maze of sharp edges and broken earth. The injured teams. Gear was scattered, and faint shapes were visible near a fallen tree trunk. They weren't moving. She took a deep breath and began her descent. Each step was deliberate. She tested each rock before shifting her weight. The safety line hummed softly behind her as the helicopter maintained its delicate balance above. The wind pushed at her clothing, but she kept moving, inch by inch. Halfway down, the slope grew steeper. Loose gravel slid beneath her shoes. She steadied herself and continued. Finally, she reached the bottom. 3 rescue team members lay near the torn tent. One was conscious, trying to sit up despite visible pain. The other 2 were lying still but breathing. She knelt beside them. "You're safe now," she said gently. "Help is here." The conscious member stared at her in disbelief. How did you get here?" "We thought no one could reach us." She smiled softly. "I've taken this path before." A weak laugh escaped him, filled with relief instead of amusement. But as she checked their injuries and planned how to bring them up, a low rumble echoed across the valley. She froze. The conscious man froze too. The mountain trembled, just slightly, but enough for her to know what it meant. A landslide was starting. And now, the clock was running faster than ever. The rumble at first was soft, almost like distant thunder. But she felt it through the ground, sharp, uneven, and growing stronger. She immediately looked upward. Small rocks began to loosen from the canyon wall, skipping down the slope with fast, nervous movements. Dust lifted into the air like a warning. She knew what it meant. The mountain was shifting. The ledge holding the helicopter, the slope she had just climbed down, the valley floor, it was all unstable. She had minutes, maybe less. She turned quickly to the conscious rescue member. "You need to stay calm," she said, lowering her voice so he could focus. "I'm getting all of you out. But we move quickly." He nodded, breathing through the pain. She checked the other 2 team members, both unconscious but still breathing. Their injuries were serious but manageable if she could get them to the helicopter fast enough. She pressed her hand to her headset. "I need an update. How stable is the ledge?" The pilot's voice crackled through the line. "Not good. The gemta vibration from the engines is affecting the rocks below us. We may have to lift off soon." "No," she said firmly. "You lift off now, and I lose our way out. Hold position." "Just a little longer." A tense silence followed. Then the pilot answered. "Understood. But hurry." She worked quickly, securing the first injured team member with a lightweight harness that she always kept clipped to her belt, a habit she had never broken, even after leaving her old life. She tied the harness around his chest and shoulders, tightening it carefully so he wouldn't slip. "Stay close to me," she said. "Lean on my left side." He nodded, trying his best to stand. She supported most of his weight, guiding him toward the steep slope. The ground rumbled again, sending a cloud of dust into the air. A larger rock slid down, bouncing near her feet before rolling away into the valley. She didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. She turned to the pilot again. "Prepare for pull-up. Once I get them to the slope's midpoint, I'll signal you." "Copy," he said, "and keep your line tight. The wind is shifting again." She adjusted the safety line attached to her harness and began climbing with the injured man. Each step was harder than before. The slope was loose, the ground softening as the mountain shifted. The man leaned heavily on her, trying not to fall. But she supported him with calm strength. Halfway up, the slope trembled again, stronger this time. She paused, holding onto a stable rock with one hand, gripping the man tightly with the other. Small stones slid past her boots, clicking sharply as they rolled down. "Don't look down," she whispered. "Just focus on breathing." He nodded and closed his eyes, trusting her completely. When she reached a safer point, She signaled upward with one sharp tug on the line. One ready for lift. The crew chief and second crew member reached out from the helicopter door, pulling the safety line upward. The injured man was slowly lifted toward the ledge, rising little by little. She guided the line from below, keeping him steady. When he finally reached the top, the crew pulled him safely into the cabin. "One is up," the pilot said. 2. More to go. She climbed back down faster this time. The mountain rumbled again, longer and deeper. A thin crack appeared on the slope, stretching slowly like a warning line. She knew time was running out, but she didn't let fear touch her. Voice. The second injured team member, the younger one, was unconscious but breathing steadily. She wrapped the harness around him carefully, making sure his neck and shoulders were supported. As she started climbing again, the rumble grew louder. A shower of tiny stones slid past her hands. She tightened her grip, focusing completely. The safety line pulled him upward. She guided his rise, constantly watching the slope to predict where the next shift might happen. When he reached the ledge, the entire helicopter shook from a sudden gust of wind. The crew chief shouted, "We're losing stability." She pressed her hand to the headset again. "Do not take off." "I'm coming up with the last one." The pilot hesitated. His voice was tight. "If we stay any longer, the ledge won't hold." "If you leave," she said softly, "the last man won't survive." Silence again, longer this time. Then, "We're staying." She immediately went back down for the third team member. He was the most injured, his breathing shallow, his arm bent awkwardly. She checked his pulse. It was weak but steady. "Please hold on," she whispered, securing him in the harness. As she lifted him, the ground beneath her gave a sudden violent jolt. A deep crack split through the slope, and several rocks tumbled down at once. Dust rose like smoke. She shielded the injured man with her body, pressing him close to the slope wall. Her heart pounded not from fear, but urgency. The mountain was collapsing faster now. She tugged the line hard, signaling the crew, "Pull him up, now!" The crew responded instantly, lifting him as quickly as they safely could. The helicopter swayed, engine straining as the ledge shifted again. She watched anxiously, guiding his rise until the crew pulled him inside. "He's in!" the crew chief shouted. But before she could breathe a sigh of relief, the ledge cracked. Loudly this time, directly beneath her. The pilot shouted into her headset, "The ledge is breaking. We have to lift off." She looked up at the helicopter, the only way out. Then the slope beneath her feet shifted. She had seconds to decide. The moment the slope shifted beneath her, the sound echoed through the entire canyon, sharp cracking. Unstoppable. Dust exploded upward, and the ground under her boots slid like loose sand. She instinctively leaned forward, gripping the rock with both hands. The mountain was no longer rumbling gently. It was breaking. The pilot's voice came through the headset, tense and urgent. "We have to take off. The ledge is collapsing." She looked up. The helicopter was shaking, its skids digging deeper into the cracking stone. The crew held onto the rails, trying to keep their balance. Wind whipped around them, blowing dust into the cabin. The injured team members were strapped in, unconscious but safe. Everyone was safe, except her. She took a breath. "Give me 10 seconds, she said, her voice steady and firm. "You don't have 10 seconds. The pilot shouted, "Then give." "Me 8, she replied. Her calmness stunned him into silence. She had always been like this, measured, fearless, precise. Even with the mountain falling apart, she didn't tremble. She needed to reach the rope line still hanging from the helicopter's door. It swayed wildly in the storm wind, rising, dropping, swinging dangerously close to the canyon wall. She scanned the rocks above her, unstable, shifting, but still climbable if she moved fast enough. She started upward. The slope shook again, harder this time. Loose gravel slid beneath her boots. She grabbed a stable rock, pulled herself up and climbed with quick, deliberate movements. She didn't think about falling. She didn't think about fear. She thought only about the rope and the helicopter. Waiting above, lower the safety line. She shouted. The crew chief reacted instantly, throwing the rope lower. It swung down inches past her reach. She pushed upward again, gripping a jagged rock with her right hand, ignoring the sharp pain. As it scratched her palm, she misreached again. Her fingers brushed the rope. The ledge cracked, loudly above her. A massive chunk of stone broke off, falling down the slope. She ducked instinctively as it smashed into the rocks just behind her, sending up a wave of dust. The ground tipped sideways under her. "Grab it!" The pilot shouted. She lunged upward. With everything she had, her hand locked around the rope. The moment her fingers wrapped around it, the rope jerked upward as the helicopter lifted, forced to rise before the ledge crumbled completely. She swung against the canyon wall, her boots scraping the rock. The rope twisted in the wind, but she held tight, using her legs to steady her body. "Hold on!" The crew chief yelled. She didn't reply. She was focused on climbing the rope, pulling herself hand over hand despite the shaking, the cold, and the dust stinging her eyes. Her arms burned, but she pulled harder. The helicopter rose higher, drifting away from the collapsing ledge. Rocks tumbled beneath her, crashing into the valley floor. The entire canyon echoed with the sound. She climbed. Faster. Halfway up, a sudden gust of wind slammed into her, twisting the rope violently. She swung out wide, suspended over open air. The world tilted, even the clouds seemed to spin. For a split second, she felt weightless, but then she tightened her grip, pulled the rope back between her arms, and steadied herself. She kept climbing. The crew chief reached for her as soon as she came within range. "Give me your hand." She lifted one arm, stretching toward him. He leaned out dangerously far, holding onto the doorframe with his other hand. Their hands met, but the helicopter tilted again as the wind hit its side. She slipped slightly. The crew chief grabbed her wrist with both hands. "I've got you," he shouted. She pulled herself upward, using every ounce of remaining strength. With one final swing, she stepped onto the helicopter floor and collapsed. Into the cabin, breathing hard. The crew chief shut the door immediately. The pilot shouted, "We're clear of the canyon." "Hold on." The helicopter rose above the mountains, just as the ledge finally gave way behind them. The valley filled with dust and falling rock, but they were already climbing into the clearer sky above the storm. She lay on the cabin floor for a moment, staring at the ceiling, her chest rising and falling. Not from fear, from focus, from effort, from the weight of everything that had happened. The pilot looked back at her through the cockpit window. "You made it." She gave a faint smile. "Told you, 8 seconds. The crew laughed softly, tired, relieved, in awe. The conscious rescue member, strapped nearby, lifted his head weakly. "Who are you?" She sat up slowly, brushing dust from her clothes. She looked at him with the same calm eyes she always had, even in school, even when hiding from her past. "I'm just someone who learned not to run from what she can do," she said. He nodded slowly, understanding more than she expected. Helicopter broke through the clouds into clear sky. Sunlight washed over the cabin, warm and bright. The storm raged below, but up here, everything felt calm again. One of the crew members looked at her. "You know, after today, no one will ever believe you're just a student." She looked out the window, watching the mountains fade into the distance. "That's all right," she said quietly. "Maybe it's time I stop pretending." The pilot's voice came over the headset one last time. "Welcome back." And for the first time in a long time, she didn't try to hide who she was.